hands are injured, your hands are tired, you have carpal tunnel syndrome, you have tennis elbow, you have a frozen shoulder, which, by the way, you should be working on those issues if you're a therapist, so they wouldn't be limiting, but actually, we start wherever we find ourselves. And I really first came to this idea. I had a student in Indianapolis who called me up and was inquiring about class. And she identified herself. I think her name was Diane. And she said she was an emergency room nurse, and she was interested in my classes. I said, great, emergency room nurse. It's a nice background to come into this kind of healing work. And she goes, well, it says, but I have an issue, and it might be something that would preclude me from being in your class. And I asked what that issue was. And she said, well, my issue is I'm a double amputee above the knees. So I have no legs. I was like, I was just thinking about it for a minute. And I go, well, can I ask you a couple of questions? And she goes, okay. I said, so you're a double amputee above the legs, but you're an emergency room nurse. She goes, that's correct. And you've been a nurse for how long? She said, 15 years. And I'm thinking about what I know about nursing, which you could put into a thimble. But the one thing I know about nursing is nurses work really, really hard. As a general rule, they're very busy. And being an emergency room nurse is a very physical job. It's a very demanding, very physical job. At least while you're on the job, right? And then I go, okay, tell me about your life. Are you married? Do you have children? She goes, yes, I am. I'm married, and I have 2 children. I said, how old are they? He says, well, one is 4, and one is 12. I'm like, okay, got a busy life at home. Aside from that, I go, okay, let me ask you another question. When you go home from work, okay, what is the first thing that you do when you walk in your house? Every day. When you go home from work, what is the very first thing you do in your house when you walk through the door? And she goes, well, I start looking for the kids, make sure they're still alive. And I'm like, actually, no, that's actually not the first thing that you do. I want you to think about it for a second. Just think about it, because you do this every day, it's not really registering. What is the first thing that you do? And she was quiet for a minute, and then she goes, oh, well, I take my legs off. In other words, I remove my prosthetics. In other words, the very first thing she does when she walks in the door is get those damn artificial legs off. Okay? Because even the very best of prosthetics is not a perfect process. They are getting better. Okay, they are getting better, but it's still, even if you have them, you don't want to be wearing them all the time if you can keep from it. I said, okay, and then you go about your business, you track your kids down, you tend to them. I said, do you cook for your family? And she says, well, of course, every day I cook for my family. And I go, okay. And I said, and when you cook, you don't wear your prosthetics, do you? And she goes, well, no. I go, is your kitchen made handicap accessible in the sense of everything is like on the ground and all this kind of thing? She goes, nope. It's a standard kitchen just like everybody else I know has. Stove, fridge, whatever. And she says, I just sit on a bar chair. And I just hustle myself around the kitchen. And it's much faster than it would be like with a wheelchair. And so she had a wheelchair, but she never used it in the house. And so I added all that up and I said, look, I said, first of all, yeah, absolutely, I think you can do the class with no legs. And absolutely, I am jealous. And I'm jealous. And I think actually the other students in the class are going to probably be jealous of you. And she goes, what? Why would you say such a thing? I said, do you understand in Thai yoga that we work on the floor? And she goes, yeah, that's kind of one of the things that attracted me to it. And I go, so where do you live all of your life? in your personal life? And she goes, on the floor. I said, yeah, you play with the kids on the floor, you climb your husband like he's furniture, you negotiate, you know, everything that you do pretty much you do down there. And I said, that's where we live, that's where we work, and what you're going to find is, yeah, we'll make some adjustments for some things. In my head I was thinking, Yanaka, push the leg. No, you know, and then I think, oh, I like a challenge. I said, I think we can work it all out. So she came to class, and actually she ended up doing all of the classes, okay? And she never had a problem. Never had a problem in the class. She had no legs. And that got me to thinking about it. I said, well, how many body parts do you actually have to be able to work like this? And all of a sudden I had this Monty Python skit playing in the back of my head. Remember the Black Knight?
Scratch.
You know, come fight like a man. You know, until literally he's got no arms and no legs, and so, I'll bite you. Fight like a man. And I had this Monty Python sketch in my head of the Black Knight. And I realized that basically, as long as you could negotiate around the client, from a physical point of view, you could come up with a way to be effective and do this work. If you could move your body around, you could do it. Okay, and then a little bit later, I had a bad injury to my back and I was paralyzed. For quite a period of time, I could not bend over because it terrified me. If I bent over and I got the least little twinge in my back, all I could think of was the pain and the paralysis. And pain to the point of view of just constant nausea and retching kind of pain, okay? And so for me, as a person who works like this, it was really, mentally, it was a setback. Okay, we have always walked on the body, always used our feet. We've always walked on the body, okay? And in fact, in the tribal traditions of the Karen and Aka people, the Lisu, Lahu, Mien, and Humam, when they do their traditional hands-on work on the floor in their huts, okay, or wherever they happen to do them, okay, they primarily walk and or with some palming. They don't do much pointed pressure because they believe, in their belief system, every point has a spirit, which they call Quan. And if you push too hard on the point, you might disturb the Quan. You might make it want to run away. Okay? So they, in their tradition, they don't believe in deep or pointed pressure at all. So everything they do with the body is based on broad, deep compression and big movements. Okay, broad, deep compression and big movements. Okay, so it turns out, what's your broad, deep, compressive modality? Is your feet. Okay, and so it's really easy to learn how to do this. And so, for example, I already told you 2 examples where missing body parts and or a defective body part might be a handicap or an encumbrance, but which with a little creativity and a little traditional ideas, it doesn't matter. If you're in a situation where you can't bend, even where you can't kneel, where you can't use your hands, or you can't use a leg or both legs, okay, you can actually adapt what we're doing to suit whatever you got, okay? So from that point of view, there's no such thing as a handicap or a physical impediment in Thai yoga. There's no such thing. We don't recognize that, okay?